Hi everyone, it's Sam, NFTstatistics with your proof daily NFT countdown. Going to do some work today on OpenSea versus Blur. A lot of people asking me, is all the volume on Blur just flippers? Are real buyers actually buying there? I did some work, did a little research, going to talk a little bit about that. Also going to dive into BrainDrops, which are completely on fire. So many collections went Parabolic yesterday. Want to dive a bit more into that. A few cool sales. Let's get right into it, starting with a quick market overview. Volumes up a touch, both on OpenSea as well as on Blur. Nothing too crazy though, still kind of at the low end of the season 2 range that we've been in. Market share still very much in Blur's favor, but a little bit more towards OpenSea over the past couple of days, mainly just because there's a little bit less airdrop farming going on Blur, a little bit less volume there in the past couple of days. Large caps down 1%, nothing making too big of moves, but Bored Ape Yacht Club, the biggest component in that index, down 3%. Mid caps also down 1%, a bit of strength in Degen Tunes, bit of weakness in Crypto Dick Butts. Nothing really all that crazy in these components. In terms of projects that had interesting news around them, the Porsche 911 project announced that they are going to be doing an airdrop, but they're only going to be dropping it to the people who minted the NFTs originally, which is really kind of silly because why would you buy an NFT if you don't get it? If you don't get the airdrops that get associated with it. From a tech perspective, very easy just to figure out who the current owners are, give them those airdrops. But instead, Porsche decided to deliver an airdrop to the people who did the original mint. Just a weird move in general. Who knows? I think a lot of the things the team has done, haven't been entirely in line with the NFT movement, but either way, still sitting above a 2 ETH floor, but the price did fall a little bit on the back of that news yesterday. Second project, which has some interesting news, Creature World. On Friday, I believe, or it was last week, they announced they were doing an open edition and they sold more than 37,000 NFTs. I believe 38,000 raised $1.7 million on this open edition, which cost 0.029 ETH. But what happened was right after the open edition closed, the price basically tanked, went from 0.029 to below 0.01 ETH. That market cap went from 1.7 million to something like $700,000. So kind of in response to that, or maybe not in response to that, maybe just in response to the great feedback and all the people who minted, Creature World came out and said that the second chapter of this project awaits. And that's what we love in NFTs, building anticipation, building mystery, building something to look forward to, a reason to buy the NFT. And sure enough, you can see here that the prices after that announcement went from about 0.01 to about 0.02. So a nice little double there on the back of this announcement. Still not at that 0.029 ETH min price where the min happened, but still nice to see that. Second story to talk about, the Claire Silver effect causes BrainDrops to completely catch fire. I call it the Claire Silver effect. I think there's a lot going on here. We'll talk about a bit more of that in a minute, but just a quick kind of looking at this table, we always look at where was most of the art project action yesterday, almost all in AI. You can see that 8 of the 10 projects were AI projects, 7 of the 10 were from BrainDrops. What is BrainDrops? BrainDrops it started in 2021, so it's a pretty old project, has about 15 projects, and it's a platform that AI artists can use and that curates AI art projects and launches them to the world. Again, very much like Artblocks is for generative art. What you can see here is over the past year, the volumes haven't been that high. Very rarely do you have a day where it does more than 100 ETH of volume or more than 100 trades. But over the past 2 days, we've gotten to a 1-year high, with the exception of that short period after Life in West America dropped. At that period, you had a huge pump in AI art across the board. Other than that, we had a massive jump yesterday in volumes, but the real jump was in prices. Okay, what this index looks at is, I think 10 or 11 of the biggest projects in BrainDrops. And you can see that this index is up 5x this year, largely because of the great things happening with Claire Silver, Pinder Van Arman doing some cool stuff, Life in West America, one of the biggest drops of the year, of course, bringing a lot of attention to the sector. Overall, just massive price movement. But yesterday, a bunch of projects that were kind of a little bit more on the back burner, a little bit quieter, completely went parabolic. Here's one chart. This one's called Sites by Artemis. You can see yesterday went from 0.7 ETH to 1.5 ETH. Chimerical Stories. This one also completely parabolic, 2 to 4. A couple other projects hitting their all-time high. You can see both of those here. So just really a ton of action across BrainDrops. And we'll go into a couple reasons why that could be. One thing I wanted to check is, were there some whales who just swept all of them? And you had a couple people who swept individual projects. This is the amount of ETH the biggest wallets purchased, but broadly it was pretty wide based. Here you have 12, 13 different wallets that spent 8 ETH or more. A couple spent over 40, but, nothing that was all that crazy. Medved here says the reason for this, the Claire Silver effect, basically on the back of her news, but other things possible. On Friday, there's another one coming. Another BrainDrops mint is coming. Looks like really cool art happening. It looks like at 12:30 CST, but pretty interesting art. Maybe people are getting ready for this. I believe in the past, whitelists have gone to people who own the Claire Silver Genesis, Gene Kogan, as well as the Pinder Van Arman. Those were the 3 first projects in BrainDrops. So that could be one thing. Another tweet I saw, this was just Twitter rumor, but it was retweeted by BrainDrops. So probably some truth here, was that there could be a free airdrop coming to people who own one of every project. It looks like there are about 130 people in that camp right now, but perhaps this also motivated people to buy a bit more of some of the smaller projects, lower projects that they didn't own. Who knows? Either way, congrats to everybody involved. Congrats to the artist, Justin Trimble. Always cool to see these new metas take off. Third thing I want to talk about is our HODLers, are the people who own NFTs, who are not in it to trading, are not in it to trade. Are they using Blur or OpenSea? Now, as we know, the vast majority of the total Blur volume, of the total NFT volume, has been on Blur for the past few weeks, ever since season 2 started. You can see it in this image here. But this chart here looks at, are the people who are trading on Blur, for the NFT volume that we're seeing, is it primarily flippers or is it long-term holders? And what you can see is this yellow zone. What that represents is NFTs that were bought that were flipped within the next 3 days. Okay, and you can see the vast majority of the volume, the vast majority of the uptick has been in these flips. Also, a huge uptick in the people who are buying NFTs and holding them, though, which is the blue area. The blue area is NFTs you hold that get held, and basically don't get sold after they're bought. You can see that's also rising. Now, if you compare Blur on the left here with OpenSea on the right, you can see like the blue and red areas have been pretty flat for both. But it's really the big difference. What Blur has, which OpenSea doesn't, is this huge trading community creating a ton of volume. But there's one chart that I thought was the most interesting and that I wanted to show you. And that's this chart right here. And what this chart looks at is the volume of people who are buying NFTs and holding them without selling them again later on Blur versus OpenSea. And it only goes back to about three or 4 days ago, because that's how we know that they haven't been flipped recently. But what you can see is in the past 2 weeks, even long-term holders are now doing more volume on Blur than on OpenSea. So in the past, when Blur was talking about doing more volume than OpenSea, it was all the flippers. The orange line was below the blue. But in the past couple of weeks, that has changed, and long-term holders have been going to Blur instead of OpenSea. Obviously, it's not entirely, but more than 50% of that volume. I think there are 2 reasons for this. The first, and this is the most important, is that the prices simply are better on Blur, both for buyers and for sellers. That is the whole purpose of their airdrop. The incentive is to incentivize a tighter bid-ask spread, and you're seeing it. The second thing is, even if you're not a Blur airdrop farmer, if you have the choice of trading on 2 platforms and one gives you free money and the other doesn't, you're probably going to go to a place that gets you the free Blur. Digging into both of these, of course, Blur is incentivizing people to bid on NFTs as well as to list their NFTs. Now, if you look at the floor price, for the different projects, you can see this here looks at the 7 projects that are doing a lot of volume, 7 of the blue chips we all know, and on every single one, the floor price is cheaper for Blur than it is for OpenSea. And that difference can range from 0.1% for Azuki all the way up to about 3% for clones. But either way, you're getting better prices as a buyer on Blur than you are on OpenSea. The flip side is for people who want to sell NFTs, and the bids, not only are the floor prices lower, but the bid prices for NFTs are higher on Blur than they are on OpenSea. This looks across the major projects, and you can see that those bids can be as much as 8% higher on Bored Ape Kennel Club, a little bit less than 1% higher on Mutant Ape Yacht Club Doodles. Either way, with that tighter bid-ask spread, pretty much everybody who wants to just go out and trade and do an immediate transaction has been going to Blur recently. So I think that that's pretty clear. But what we're seeing again is that long-term holders too are spending more time on Blur than on OpenSea. The question is, will this continue indefinitely in the future? And I think this is just my view. I think that the behavior we are seeing right now is extremely reliant on the incentives. A couple reasons for this. And I did a bunch of airdrop farming yesterday, went onto the platform, spent a couple hours trying to get myself some airdrop just to learn about what goes on there. And one of the things I noticed is that on a lot of the collections right now, the price that you are offered is lower than the price people are bidding. So you have people saying, I will sell anyone this Moonbird for 6.04 ETH. And you have other people saying, I will buy any Moonbird for 6.06 ETH. Okay, why aren't they just transacting? And the reason is because neither of them actually wants to trade. What the airdrop farmers want to do is just have the highest bid for as long as possible. That's when they get the points. No one actually wants to buy the NFTs. When they buy the NFTs, that's less ETH that they can farm with. They normally just go and dump it, but here you see Azuki, Moonbirds, and Bored Ape Planet Club. In each of those cases, the highest bid is above the lowest ask, something you pretty much will never see in a normal marketplace. So to me, this just shows that this is not sustainable behavior. This is actually behavior that's really reliant on that airdrop. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing this. The second thing is that the P&Ls of airdrop farmers remain sharply negative. We talked about Machi Big Brother around the big ape trade. He was down, 2,200 ETH. Now he's down 2,500 ETH. So he continues to lose money, not because his P&L is negative, but royalties are negative. Also a little bit of attrition in P&L. It's just overall, you need to be getting a lot of reward to justify kind of the ETH P&L loss that people are taking. You can see this one here. I don't have the label here, but this is Franklin's P&L. He's down almost 300 ETH, largely because of apes that he lost money on when Machi also got stuffed. But also just the friction of buying and selling really quickly, isn't really working for these guys. So, it just shows like the reason they're doing it is because they're getting all this Blur token that is eventually going to come to them. I've said before, I think it's around 800 ETH per day. So a ton to overcome some of these negative P&Ls. But by and large, I don't see this as all that sustainable once the incentives end. I think what they're trying to do here is create these incentives, get more and more people used to their platform. So when the incentives go away, there'll be more interest in being there. We'll see what happens. I'm very curious, but that's a little bit of my takeaways. A couple other charts I thought were interesting. One is, are the long-term holders paying higher royalties on Blur than the flippers? What you can see here is, yes, they are. A couple things I'd say though, the blue line is long-term holder royalty payout. The red is flippers. A couple things I'd say. One is that it's not the buyer that actually decides what the royalty is. So they get kind of hit with the royalties, but my guess is that the buyers are buying the more expensive NFTs and ones that are a little bit off the airdrop farming game. So that's one thing. Two is the buyers are still paying very low royalties relative to what they used to be kind of in the royalty era when the average royalty paid was about 5 to 6%. Thought that was kind of interesting. The second thing is OpenSea volumes actually head up pretty well. If you don't look at Blur, it kind of doesn't look like anything has changed all that dramatically for OpenSea. So who knows? I think a lot more of this volume is flipping. A lot more of this volume is a bit more of the wash trading type stuff that we're seeing in the marketplace, but net, they seem to be pretty flat ever since this era began. Last thing to talk about, notable sales, two of them to talk about. The first is this piece called Destination by, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Gelo or Gelo. I am sorry. I don't know how to pronounce it, but 12.1 ETH. I think this is an awesome sale, an awesome piece. A lot of the real coolness of this is in these red figures. I'd go check out the sale on Super Rare. These red figures kind of looking up at the plane, at the moon. For a bit of background on this artist, he says he's an architect and an artist. Over his 20 years, his work is to reinterpret architectural forms in view of art in different time and space. That's how he self-describes himself on his page. He's had some really cool sales. I love the textures. I love the colors. I love the use of the moon. But he's had a bunch of sales kind of in that 10 ETH range. So this is still a very high sale for him. I believe an all-time high. So congrats to him on that. And then the last sale I want to talk about was this piece, Monsters by C3. Now we had C3. We talked about him extensively, an Iranian artist. We talked about him extensively yesterday, but he sold this piece for 13 ETH to Mr. 703. I believe this is an all-time high for him. So exciting to see more work from him. Congrats to him. Congrats to the buyer as well. That's all for me. I really hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, like it below, subscribe to the channel. Tell us what you think in the comments. Follow us on @ProofPodcasts. Just one word, Proof Podcast. And if you follow us there, you'll get notifications every time we launch a new show. Would love to see you following us there. We follow a lot of people back. Hope to see you there. Have a great day. We'll be back tomorrow and every weekday with another show. Thanks.